How you think is the most important thing about you.
Okay, welcome to F1 Session 4. Man, this one is over discipline and boundaries, and this can be a difficult session to walk through. Some of the concepts that are going to come up here can cause a little bit of conflict on the inside as the Lord and through His Holy Spirit begins to shine a light on some areas where we may be kind of outside the boundaries, and that can create some conflict inside of us and can create a little bit of emotion. So it's not uncommon at all during this session for people to get a little rigid and kind of, that's not fair, or to realize, man, just kind of throw your hands in the air. I've had this happen a lot. Just throwing their hands in the air going, man, this is so me. This is just explaining me so much, and kind of laughing about it. But this is a very, very important piece of your personal development, is learning how to live with discipline and boundaries in your life. Remember in the last session we talked about this growth of a leader begins with personal development. And without discipline and boundaries in your life, there's no way you'll be able to navigate and work through the struggles of personal development. As soon as things get difficult, you'll just quit. Or you'll just move to the side and avoid struggle. You like that move right there? You'll just avoid those struggles as they come, and they don't ever get an opportunity to form you and fashion you. So I hope you enjoyed this session. It begins with a verse out of Proverbs, Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7. Actually, the first 5 books of Proverbs. If you're looking for something to read in the Bible, read those first 5 books. They are wonderful in talking about the importance of wisdom and discipline and boundaries in your life, and what that means to your Heavenly Father as you embrace discipline and boundaries in your life. I encourage you to read that. But our first verse, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, and fools despise wisdom and discipline. Man, that's really interesting there. I hope you took some time already with your facilitator and in your group in talking about how do you define discipline? What does the Bible have to say about discipline? Did you find that were you like me? Did you find that a lot of times you equate discipline with punishment? That's how I was for many years. I mean, up until my late 20s, I thought discipline was punishment. It wasn't just about making a choice, a good choice in a good direction. But the fear of the Lord, I love this, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. The fear of the Lord is simply, it's not like, oh no, I'm afraid of God. But no, what this is it's a reverence and a respect for the Lord, that you do what He is telling you to do rather than just what you want to do. Fools despise wisdom and discipline. But those that fear the Lord, those that line their life up with the heart of the Father, those are the ones that begin the process of moving toward knowledge and wisdom and understanding. So again, this can be a difficult thing at this, especially when we're young. This can be a difficult thing. We move on down to some character here. Let's take a look at this verse in Romans chapter 5. Oh man, I love this verse. I remember the Lord bringing me to this verse during a time when I was really struggling with character and discipline and all that kind of stuff. And all of a sudden it just downloaded. I'm sure you've had that experience before where you've been reading a verse and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I think I'm hearing this for the very first time. And it can be really, really powerful. That's how this was for me. Here, let's read this. Not only so, but we also rejoice in our suffering. Oh, okay. First of all, that doesn't make sense to me. I've been doing everything I can to avoid struggle. I've been doing everything I can to sidestep it, because remember, when I thought of struggle, it made me think that I was weak. If I wasn't weak, then I wouldn't have struggle. So I want to be strong. Strong means that I won't have struggles and difficulties. So anytime weakness would come along, I would get mad, because I didn't want to be weak. I wanted to be strong. Again, just really misinterpreting how life worked on that. And it led me down some long, painful, frustrating roads. But we rejoice in our suffering. And the reason why we rejoice in our suffering is because we know something. Okay? Now that's key for us to catch. The reason why we can rejoice in our suffering is because we have understanding. We have a knowledge of something. Okay? There's a connection here, if you're making this connection, to Proverbs 1:7. We know something. We know something. It says here, we know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope. And it goes on to say, and hope does not disappoint. It's really something. So, again, how did you define character? What were your thoughts on that? Hopefully you guys got a chance to talk a little bit about that in your group, about how you are defining character and discipline. Also, taking the time right here in the class to answer these questions. So with this verse in mind, how do you get to hope? Where does hope come from? If I'm saying, Lord, just give me some hope, how is he going to answer that? What is the path to hope? How about character? How do you build character? Using this verse, how is character built? And finally, when do I need to persevere? When do I need to stand and persevere? These are great things for you to take a moment and talk about. If you haven't talked about it, you might want to go ahead and shut the video off. Spend some time and go ahead and spend some time getting some answers to these questions. So here we are introduced to our first of two companions along the road to personal development. It's called suffering. If you've ever read the book Hind's Feet in High Places, this is one of the companions for the young much afraid as she heads to the top of the mountain. She gets a companion named suffering. You guys, suffering is not something for us to avoid. Now again, it doesn't mean that every single suffering is from the Lord. I can definitely, and you've probably done this just like me, I have made some poor decisions which has brought suffering my way. God didn't bring that, I brought that. But there have been some other things in my life where there has been some difficulty and struggle and suffering, and the Lord brought that to form me and shape me. And that's the suffering that we're talking about here. So, hopefully you begin to see a connection between discipline and character here. Okay? Let me show you a little example. I use this a lot in life coaching and when I'm training leaders and disciples and things like that. And see if you can follow, because we're headed toward a huge revelation or a huge concept that I want you to try to grab. And I think this picture will help us with that quite a bit. Okay? It's all going to start right here, okay? It's this little tiny circle. And we're going to say, I don't know, hopefully you can even see that little tiny circle in there. And the reason why it's small is not because it actually is small, but because so many times it feels small. Because what this represents is boundaries in my life. The boundary is simply the boundary in my life. It's the rules that I need to submit to. It's the rules that I need to obey. Whether those rules early on in life, the rules that are brought on by mom and dad in our household, or my teachers, or a little bit as I grow, maybe my coaches or at my boss, and so on. These are definitely boundaries that the Lord asks me to live within. But again, I use a small circle, not because it is small, but because so often it feels small. Living within boundaries can feel like, I just want to do what I want to do. Have you ever found yourself in that spot? Raise your hand if you have. Have you ever been, you just feel like, the boundaries, and you feel like somebody's trying to hold you back or keep you down or something like that. Because you see that, this could be so much better. I have such a better idea. How many of you guys have done this? Even though these are the boundaries, you've been willing to push the boundaries out so that you could do something, so that you could get away with something, so that you could enjoy some type of activity or something, or so you could think a certain way. But you've pushed the boundaries rather than living within the boundaries. Have you ever done that before? If you have, say yes. Actually say it or raise your hand. Guys, I did this all the time. I just pushed the boundaries. I always had a good excuse. I always had a good reason. It was because the boundaries were stupid, I always had a good reason to push the boundaries. If the boundaries were good boundaries, it wouldn't be any problem. But the boundaries were bad boundaries, or they were stupid boundaries. So it made it okay for me to push them. But you know what's coming? Eventually, these boundaries, they're going to feel too small as well. And I'll find myself pushing them again. Have you done that? You know what I'm talking about. We push them a little bit more. Mom and Dad may say be home at 11, and we go, 11:15 isn't bad. And then after 11:15, and I'm not really getting in trouble, I take that as permission. Because I don't get in trouble, I take it as permission. And then all of a sudden 11:15 becomes 11:30. You know, have you been there before? Or I was only going to spend a certain amount, but I spent over a little bit. But, you know, nothing really happened, so next time I spend even more. And then eventually, that boundary begins to feel too small. And I expand it again, and I expand it again, and I expand it again. Each time feeling like the boundaries were too small. Now again, the original boundary is still right here. But I have pushed it. I have pushed the boundaries to maintain my lifestyle, as opposed to making sure my lifestyle stays within the boundaries. Okay? And each time I get away with it, quote unquote, and getting away with it doesn't necessarily mean you don't get caught. You might get caught, but if it's in your heart to push the boundaries, then probably no punishment is going to be enough to keep you from doing that again. You know? Yeah, you know, give me detention. Make me do this. Make me do that. Yeah, fire me. Okay, well, I'm going to keep doing it because, again, my heart is not willing to submit to the boundaries. And so I tend to just keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing. Not everyone's like this. There are probably some of you sitting around the table right now that go, you know, no, I think I've done a good job of living within the boundaries. And that's tremendous. That is tremendous. There's been a real grace and a real mercy on your life because I just want you to know that is God. It takes God to obey God. It's not just I'm a better person than someone else, although we can tend to interpret it that way a lot. But that's just because you have not struggled with discipline doesn't mean that you're necessarily a better person. I'm not thinking you're thinking that. But sometimes we can fall into that trap. If you just obey, everything's cool, you know. Well, there's a real mercy on you. But I imagine there's also several around the table that are a lot like me. We pushed the boundaries all the time. We just push them back. Now here's what happens as we push the boundaries. Eventually, we get all the way out here, and what we've done is we have redefined, now catch this, we have redefined what reality is. We have redefined truth. Now truth is what I say it is, not what it actually is. It's what I say it is. And I have pushed it out, pushed it out, pushed it out. And now when someone from the center, someone from within the boundary says, hey, you should come in and obey the rules. You should come back and be within the boundaries. Now, we are so far away from that boundary that it seems impossible to get back to it. In fact, it seems silly. It's like, nobody lives that way. Are you kidding? That's like old-fashioned. That's traditionalism. That's religious thinking. That's just trying to hold me down. There's all kinds of things. Because we've learned to push the boundaries, even the thought of going back and being within the boundaries seems so far away. And eventually, if we're not careful, we'll get so far from it that the only real answer is just to keep going and keep moving. I remember being in that position. It's a dark spot to be. You feel totally righteous in your idea. I'm thinking right. But you're only thinking right because you have redefined your reality. You have redefined what truth is. Truth now is what you have determined it to be. It's not what it actually is. It's what you've determined it to be. And now how about this? We have an encounter with God. And God says, Clay, I want you to come back into the boundaries. But again, I can find myself so far out here that even with God, I can say, God, that's not reality. People don't actually do that. That's Old Testament stuff. You know, this is like modern. This is good. It's good for me to be doing what I'm doing. And we can do a lot of rationalization, find ourselves outside of the boundaries. It can be a dangerous place. So here you go. When you look at this, down at the bottom of the page here, which phrase best explains you most of the time? Not every time. I'm sure you're going to have some differences on this. But most of the time, do you find that you change your boundaries to fit your lifestyle? Or are you a person that changes your lifestyle to make sure it stays within the boundaries? Again, personal development begins with discipline and character. And if this is something that I struggle with, if discipline and boundaries is something I struggle with, then it is going to be very difficult, if not impossible, for me to grow in my personal development. And even though I might get leadership positions, and even though I might get authority in my life, if I haven't taken the time to develop my character, then that authority can be used against people. And it can lead me to some bad places where you don't want to find yourself. So, it's interesting too, a lot of times people will misinterpret, this as we have written there. This is called pushing out your boundaries like this, you guys. That's called rejecting discipline, all right? Fools despise discipline and wisdom. Okay, so that's what that's called. Although we want to redefine it using something that sounds a whole lot better. It's like personal freedom. I can do what I want to do. That's huge in our culture right now. You can't tell me what to do. This is how I define truth, and you can't tell me it's not the truth. You have your truth, I have my truth. You can't say anything about it. In fact, in our culture here in North America right now, there's even we're on the fringe of saying some of that are even hate crimes. To look at somebody that has another definition of truth and say, that's the wrong definition. Unfortunately, what I can find is I've screwed up my idea of truth, they've screwed up their idea of truth, and we're both sitting here in conflict. You guys, we all know the truth isn't just a list of rules. The truth is a person. The truth is a human. The truth is Jesus Christ. Remember, he said that. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And the only way to get through the Father is through Jesus. It's through truth. So if we're wanting to have this closer relationship, now see if you can catch this. This is important. If we're wanting to move closer to the Lord and encounter Him and expand our capacity to understand how He feels about us and how He thinks about us and increase our capacity to feel near Him and have confidence with Him, then we've got to get to a place where we are willing to embrace discipline, where we are willing to change our lifestyle to fit within the boundaries. And again, that can be hard. That can be really hard. Remember, we talked our last class about personal development, moving to mentorship. If we don't have that discipline and character, then when our mentor, which could even be the Holy Spirit, when our mentor says, nope, you need to stay within the boundaries, we won't do it because we lack the foundation to do that. And man, this can just make me mad because I want to do what I want to do. I just want to do what I want to do. And I can get mad. I can blame external things all the time. It's not me. You don't understand. I would do it if this person would do that. Or if the situation were like this, then I wouldn't have any problem doing that. If my boss would just ask me this way, then I wouldn't have any problem doing that. If my mom wouldn't scream at me, then I would be able to do it. But we begin blaming a lot of things on the outside for the decisions that we make. And that's unfortunate. That takes us to our next step here, where we see the difference between being emotionally driven in our life versus being character driven in our life. You see, those of us, how about this? You see, those times when we look at external circumstances and we are reacting to those external circumstances, that's being emotion driven. When we're saying, oh, well, they need to do this. Well, they need to do it first. If they could do this, then I'll do this. That's being emotionally driven. As opposed to character driven. Character driven is somebody that is driven because of something that is inside of them. Whether the external circumstances are this, that, or the other, it doesn't matter. There is something inside that anchors them. It's called character. Man, I sure would like to increase in character. I sure would like to have more character. You can do it. But it begins with embracing struggle. It begins with locking arms with suffering, because suffering will lead us to a place called perseverance, and perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. Guys, that's the path. That's how we get there. We don't just pray for it and wake up one day, hey, all of a sudden I got character. Character is not natural. Character is not something you're born with. You are given gifts from the Father, but you are not given character. You have to build that. You have to build that, and you build it one decision at a time. One decision at a time. So again, there's a handful of different phrases here. Character-driven versus emotion-driven. I love this. Character-driven is I'm going to do right and then feel good about it. Emotion-driven is I'm going to wait until I feel good before I do it. If I don't feel like it, I won't do it. You know, my dad used to say all the time, hey, Clay, I need you to go do this. I need you to mow the lawn. I need you to do this. And I go, you know, I don't really feel like it right now, but I'll do it in a minute. As if in a little bit I'll feel like doing it, and that's when I'll do it. Again, there was a character issue there for me. I was much more emotionally driven. And then character, they are commitment driven, whereas emotional people are more convenient driven. Now again, I'm not going to read through all these because you can with your facilitator there. But the key here isn't necessarily, and there might be some of you in the group, I want to make sure that everything, you know, that if I circle something, it's going to be over on the character side. It's not about getting 100% of your decisions over on the character-driven side. Because what I'd like for you to do is read through these. Are you more character-driven or more emotion-driven? Just walk down through there and circle those. Again, you're going to have times where you're on one side or the other, but where do you feel like you're mostly throughout your days? You feel like you're on the left or on the right? Now again, the goal isn't to try to get everything over to the left side on character-driven. The goal is to be aware of where you're over on the right side, being emotionally driven. Okay? A lot of times, if we're not careful, we can redefine reality to whatever I feel like. That's being emotionally driven. You just want to be careful with that and want to be aware of that when it's going on. Developing character depends not merely on how well you do things that you enjoy, but it depends upon how well you do things even when you don't enjoy them. And that can be hard, because I just want to do things that I like. I just, you know, when I come home from school, I just want to do nothing. When I'm at college, I just, you know, maybe I'll go to class, maybe I won't. You guys, I was a terrible student in college. I made okay grades, but man, I was a terrible student. Missed class all the time, but I learned how to manipulate people early on as a kid. I learned how to talk myself out. Wait a minute. Do some of you guys know what I'm talking about? I learned how to talk myself out of situations. I learned how to communicate with adults and how to kind of schmooze and how to kind of get them to see things my way. Do some of you guys know what I'm talking about? Some of you, I'm sure you do. You got to turn on the personality and kind of get the eyes going. Oh, but you know, I just tried so hard. Can I just have a little bit more time to turn this assignment in? And the teacher goes, sure. Boop. I've just expanded the boundaries and I got away with it, and so I took it as permission. You guys, one time in college, I skipped a final because I was sleepy. I just didn't want to get up, you know? And I knew that I could go in and just schmooze the teacher, and I did. And the teacher said, oh, that's fine, you can take it later. I took it, beep, as permission, and it just increased. I'll never forget my junior year in college. It was the first professor that I had ever encountered that I couldn't manipulate. How do you think that felt? How do you think I responded to a teacher that I couldn't manipulate? I was furious. I couldn't control him. I couldn't get him to do what I wanted him to do, and I got so mad. I mean, in their office, I was yelling at him. Yes, I was yelling at him. I was a college kid yelling at a college professor, calling him stupid, calling him names, couldn't believe they would do this, couldn't believe they would do that. Because you know what? I got an F. I flunked a class because I didn't go to class. And at the very beginning, she said, if you miss so many classes, I'll flunk you. And that's exactly what happened, and I couldn't manipulate her. And of course, the great thing about this story is the class was beginning basketball. I have one F on my transcript from college, and it's beginning basketball. Isn't that crazy? I mean, I was a state-recognized player in high school, and here I am flunking beginning basketball in college because I didn't go to class, because I hadn't built a foundation of discipline and character. Why go to basketball? If I need to shoot free throws, I'll just do that at the end. Why do I need to go to learn how to shoot a free throw or learn how to shoot a layup? So I didn't go. I didn't see the value in it because I lacked personal discipline. And I had become very comfortable with pushing boundaries. You guys, it's a dangerous place to be. So hopefully this will give you enough to talk about and enough to think about and enough to go to the Lord and the Holy Spirit about in prayer to say, man, these are some areas I need to look at. This is some stuff, this idea of discipline. Because you guys, the path to discipleship, it's even in the Word, the path of discipleship is lined or paved with discipline. And if you struggle with discipline, it's going to be a real hard road. I mean, you'll get there. Don't get me wrong. God's big enough. He'll get you there. He's not going to let you escape. I got there, and I had major issues. But it can be a long, hard road. So I encourage you to spend some time now in discussion talking about some of these places in your life where you have pushed the boundaries, where you do feel like discipline is a negative thing because you're looking for things to be comfortable, looking for things to be the way you want them to be. All right, I hope you've enjoyed Session 4 on discipline and boundaries. It can be tough. Go get them. Don't give up.
How you think is the most important thing about you.